Mellow greetings, everybody. My name is James. I am from the internet. Today we are going to be talking about mutual aid in the digital age. Now, last month, Reddit found itself on the front page of every single publication in the country thanks to the WallStreetBets community taking on a hedge fund over what was essentially the kicking corpse of the GameStop retail operation. Now, if you were paying attention, that had kind of a glorious story arc that started with David versus Goliath and ended with you always knew it was going to end this way. But the larger story that happened in between the beginning and end point of that arc is that hundreds of thousands of people from all over the country, all different walks of life, found themselves converging in a centralized place, looking to once again find a sense of community, because they don't have that since the lockdown, a sense of hope. They don't have that since they were told to stay home and are no longer getting paychecks or government assistance. And they were looking for answers. And that many people came together in a very short period of time around one small issue. And it became gigantic because people are sitting at home and they are craving an opportunity to get back with other people, to find a way out of the hole, and to try to move their lives forward instead of feeling like they're slowly sinking in quicksand. So it was no surprise when I checked the news today, and again, there was another story about people coming together, and once again, Reddit was the place where it happened. Reddit is America's unofficial unemployment hotline. It looks like, once again, people are finding holes and gaps in the systems that are supposed to help them, and they're all coming together on the internet to find a workaround because it's their only chance at salvation. In early December, Alex Branch's car broke down. A 23-year-old former arcade employee in Southern Virginia, Mr. Branch had been receiving unemployment benefits since he was laid off in March and figured he would have no problem paying for the repairs. But when he checked his bank account, he was troubled to find that the payments had stopped. He had failed to get useful information from his state's unemployment office before, so he turned to the one place he figured he could get an explanation: Reddit. Quote, "I'm very confused and have no idea what to do," Mr. Branch wrote on the unemployment subreddit, a Reddit forum whose popularity has skyrocketed during the pandemic. Gee, I wonder why it skyrocketed. I'm going to assume the subreddit awesome places to go for a beach vacation in June has seen a decline in traffic. The next day, another user commented on Mr. Branch's post using a common abbreviation for extended benefits, an emergency unemployment program. Quote, "Were you on EB? If so, EB was cut off back on November 21st. Mr. Branch hadn't realized he'd been on extended benefits, which kicked in after he exhausted 26 weeks of regular unemployment, plus 13 weeks granted additionally in the March pandemic stimulus bill. Virginia stopped payments because the state's unemployment rate had fallen under 5%, triggering an end to federal funding for the extended benefits program. Quote, "I didn't know about it. That's the biggest frustration that I had about the fact that I never received the email that it was going to be shut off." Now, before we can continue, I'm going to drop a general overall note here as somebody who in the past has collected unemployment benefits and has had to go through the cycle of applying for and then continuing to maintain eligibility to keep getting those payments in multiple states. Unemployment is not easy to apply for, nor is it easy to prove that you're unemployed through no fault of your own, nor is it easy to get in touch with somebody to find out why your unemployment case is being held up. All of these things are purposeful. It is a combination of influences, the first of which being that every single one is maintained individually by their own states, and every state has different rules, regulations, and thresholds. Now, the second issue with this is that if states spent money working on their unemployment insurance benefits program, people would lose their minds. You want to put as little money as possible into unemployment so that it's tedious and painful and an overall shitty experience so that it will motivate the lazy plebes to get off their asses and get a shittier job that pays even less just so they don't have to deal with this nightmare. For many of the millions of Americans like Mr. Branch who lost jobs because of the coronavirus, the stress of being unemployed in a pandemic has been compounded by the difficulty of navigating disorganized and often antiquated state and federal unemployment systems. Information from overwhelmed state offices and websites is often confusing, and reaching an official who can answer questions is nearly impossible. Again, if you've ever been on one of those websites, they all look and feel like they were designed and put up sometime in the 80s and have probably not been updated in the last 2 decades. They are not there to be useful. They are there to be painful, to motivate you to not be unemployed. Because poverty and impending homelessness or starvation supposedly isn't enough to motivate the really lazy people. No, we have to make the whole process of being unemployed as shitty as humanly possible. Faced with a seemingly impenetrable bureaucracy between them and a financial lifeline, many have turned to what seems like the only place to go for help: the internet. As unemployment claims shot up early in the pandemic, so did posts on the unemployment subreddit. That subreddit once typically had fewer than 10 posts a day, but it quickly ballooned to nearly 1,000 posts a day in April and May as the crisis wore on. Posts and comments spiked in the weeks following changes to benefit programs. In January, nearly 10 months after the first lockdowns, the forum had one of its busiest weeks ever, driven by delays in payments and uncertainty around legislation signed last year. Once again, this is a product of a purposely broken system. The federal government rolls out changes to this current federal program, and then each individual state has to accept the parameters of the program, figure out how it affects them individually in their state budget, then try to figure out who it is who still has the password to the website. The password's just password. Nobody changed it. And then put the update on the website so that people can find it, because there's no other way for people to find out the information. As hiring stalls and the economy shows signs of slowing again, the continued popularity of the unemployment subreddit underscores how the system remains broken for so many people. As of this week, roughly 70,000 people were subscribed to the forum. When asking a question, people must include the state they're in and are reminded to search for an answer before posting a new query. The moderators help keep the conversation on topic by removing posts that don't meet the criteria. Much of the activity on the unemployment subreddit also happens in the comments of individual posts, where people answer questions, share information and tips, or simply commiserate. As a general side note here, moderators on a subreddit or on the Reddit forum are not paid. So all of these people are volunteers using the ludicrous amount of spare time they have, because they no longer have jobs, to sit around on the internet and find people to help, rather than sitting around and just bemoaning the fact that they're screwed. According to this week's Labor Department report, over 20 million Americans were receiving some form of state or federal unemployment benefits, and more than 1 million filed new claims. That's down from the peak of over 30 million this summer, but it still represents a number that federal and state assistance programs that are outdated and cobbled together are still struggling to handle. The unemployment insurance is typically funded and administered at the state level, but because of the pandemic, the federal stimulus package passed in March supplied funding for programs that expanded who could apply for unemployment and how long someone could receive benefits, as well as increased the amount people were receiving. Almost a year later, different parts of the package have expired and been extended or altered at different times. And this really gets to the root of the situation. And yes, it goes back to 45, El Presidente, and the previous regime. Early on in the pandemic, Donald Trump and his inner circle of totally cool and morally upstanding advisors decided that they would offer no unified federal response plan. Number one, it would cost money. Number two, it would require effort. And number three, none of them had any fucking clue how to do any of that. So instead, they abdicated all responsibility, went like this, punted, left it all to the states, and then occasionally signed some orders or drove some funding towards a state whose governor is a favorite of Donald Trump's. So basically, you got a piecemeal, mismatched response to a global pandemic by the federal government, and states were left to hang individually. Some states have dealt with it better than others because some states have invested money in this specific infrastructure while most have not. Either way, Donald Trump and his inner circle really didn't give a fuck. They were just going with the we'll fake it till we make it philosophy. This is why when Biden got into the White House and they looked at the federal stockpile, there wasn't a single fucking syringe or mask to be found because Trump even lied about that little bit that the federal government was supposedly handling to help the problem. Quote, "It's like studying ghosts," Mr. Branch said of his attempts to figure out if he could restart payments under the latest legislation, which went into effect on December 27th. "It keeps changing, and there's no 100% certain thing in it," he said. Post after post on the unemployment subreddit conveys bureaucratic problems with endless variations. How to file a claim depending on your circumstances. What to do if you made a mistake on your claim. What different statuses on your claim might mean. How to navigate confusing and glitch-prone online portals. And even how to speak to an actual person to get issues resolved. Again, we've already discussed how these programs are heavily underfunded. One of the most heavily underfunded portions of these programs are their online portals. You wanted to force people to have to go to the shitty unemployment center in the shitty part of town and wait on a ridiculously long line to meet with one of the few people there just because you're required to go talk to them. This is supposed to motivate you to not be lazy. Unlike homelessness and starvation, which apparently people are totally cool with and it doesn't motivate them. Just, the hassle of having to go to the unemployment office, that's going to be the thing that tips it over and suddenly makes them go, maybe I should just go get a job instead, right? Jammed phone lines are something that Mr. Branch has become particularly used to. His girlfriend was also laid off in March and soon went on unemployment. Months later, she began receiving notices to repay $4,194 in benefits. In October, Mr. Branch called the Virginia Unemployment Commission to ask for an explanation. He said his phone logged 453 calls before anybody picked up. Earlier in the pandemic, the deluge of unemployment claims and technical glitches slowed the process of payments to a crawl. Now, some payments are also being delayed as states investigate claims for possible fraud or errors. Yes, now we're going to get to the part of the show where we talk about how much fraud there is in unemployment, while nobody mentions the fact that corporations and the Catholic Church defrauded the PPP emergency payroll plan to the tune of about $2.5 billion in the last year, just before Donald Trump and Steve Mnuchin changed the rules and made it so that they weren't loans and nobody had to pay them back, even if they fired the employees that money was supposed to keep employed in the first place. At the end of last year, California revealed that billions in benefits had been paid fraudulently and subsequently halted payments to 1.4 million people because of fraud concerns. Ah, yes, means testing your own programs. Still a good way to fuck the poor. Other states have had similar issues, though at smaller scale. For people who rely on these benefits to pay for necessities like rent or food, however, a delayed payment can feel like no payment. Many people come to the unemployment subreddit to offer answers, not just find them. Albert Pierce, who had been working in a call center in San Diego until the pandemic, spends time every day trying to answer questions about California's system. He lives alone and can't easily return to work because he has a lowered immune system. After first visiting the site when he encountered a hitch in his own unemployment benefits, Mr. Pierce was shocked by the number of people who had no idea what to do. The thought that someone might go hungry or miss rent because they were simply stymied by the system was unacceptable to him. Quote, "At that point, I just made a decision. You know what? A couple hours every day, I'm going to do this because I just can't turn away." Like others answering questions, Mr. Pierce does not have any background in unemployment insurance or state government. Some on the forum work for state unemployment offices, but the majority of those offering tips and advice are other out-of-work people who have hard-earned experience with the system. Despite the amount of help and information being offered every day, often the only suggestions to a question are simple, if frustrating. Wait for payments to arrive or keep calling an unemployment office until they pick up. For the record, if those of you have absolutely no idea what this is because you live in America and you're purposely kept ignorant about this sort of thing, what Mr. Pierce is doing, is called working class solidarity. And it happens once you have awareness of the class system. Mr. Pierce, as a member of the working class, is offering his knowledge of these systems, not as a professional or paid consultant, but freely to other members of the working class who are also currently struggling. If you are a member of the working class, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And if you don't know if you are a member of the working class or not, I assure you, you are, because if you were a wealthy capitalist, you'd know that shit. So yes, you should be demanding more of your state government. You should be demanding more of your local officials. And yes, you should be leaning very hard on the federal government to start moving with that COVID aid before everybody else is out on the street. But if nothing else, your takeaway from this should be that if you are there for other people will be there for you. And if enough people do that, well, now you have a large community. You have a base. You have an organized core that you can go out with and actually affect change through leverage. Just something you might want to think about while you're sitting at home without a job and a whole lot of free time on your hands. Until next time, my name is James and I'm from the internet. And I'm out. Peace.